They mocked the maid's daughter. Then she danced. The ballroom was a glass box full of light and rules. Chandeliers dropped like frozen fireworks from the ceiling. A quartet sawed velvet from their strings. Polished floors reflected everything except the ugly parts people hid in their voices. Servers moved like clock hands, refilling crystal with bubbles that made laughter thinner and louder. At the edge of the room where the light thinned, a girl stood by a service door in a navy dress her mother had hemmed by hand. Her name was Lila. Her mother, Ruth, was in the pantry counting dessert plates, lips moving as she double-checked numbers that had to be perfect even when her life wasn't. Lila's hair was braided into a crown to keep it tidy. The dress hugged her softly. She was soft everywhere, and she knew it the way you know the outline of your own shadow. She had learned early that some people treated softness like a punchline. The donors for the City Arts Fund were on their third round of champagne and compliments. On the dais, the master of ceremonies, a man with a tuxedo that tried too hard, announced the Open Dance Challenge, a tradition where guests pledged extra money if someone brave enough took the floor solo. It was supposed to be fun. Sometimes fun is a stage where cruelty puts on a bow tie. A cluster of teens in glitter and confidence whispered near the dessert tower. They were children of board members and patrons, born onto guest lists. One of them, Mason, wore a smirk like a cufflink. His date, Willow, tilted her head toward Lila and said, "What about her?" The word her carried a weight it shouldn't. The group turned. They saw the navy dress, the braid, the soft arms, the brown skin. They saw the service door behind Lila and decided that proximity was identity. "Bet she won't," Mason said, loud enough for the walls to hear. "Bet she can't." Lila felt the gaze like a draft. She pretended to study the framed portrait of a ballerina hung over the fireplace, a woman frozen mid-leap, every muscle saying yes to air. Lila had watched that painting every time she'd come with Ruth to help before events. The ballerina, a map she traced with her eyes. She loved dance the way some kids love rain, as a language their body knows without translation. But love doesn't. Pay tickets, and Ruth's schedule didn't leave hours for studios that charged more for a month than their rent. Lila danced in the laundry room between cycles, where the dryer became a drum and the bare bulb a spotlight that didn't judge. The MC was still calling for a volunteer when Mason glided across the floor with exaggerated gallantry, bowing to Lila like a prince in a play who'd missed rehearsal. "Will you do the honor?" he asked, words dipped in syrup and sharpened with a knife. Willow giggled. A couple of parents turned to watch, curious, then complicit. Lila's chest tightened. She could hear the pantry door click as Ruth stepped out, drawn by a current she couldn't yet name. "She's shy," Willow sang to the room. "But for the arts," Mason added, pressing a hand to his heart as if it had ever held anything heavy, "she'll give us a show." Someone clapped. Someone else who wanted to be on the right side of a joke joined. The MC, not reading the room because he'd never learned how to read people like Lila, brightened. "We have a volunteer!" he cried, beckoning. Lila stared at the floorboards and saw wood grains like waves. If she stepped wrong, she would drown. If she said no, they would laugh. If she said yes, they would laugh. Ruth's hand found Lila's elbow, small and firm. "We don't owe them anything," she whispered. Lila looked at her mother, at the lines around her mouth earned by 1,000 polite yeses. She looked at the portrait over the fireplace again, the ballerina arrested midair, and felt every giggle gather like a storm behind her. Her stomach trembled. Her feet wanted to run. Her bones wanted to speak. "1 minute," Lila said, voice low and steady. She stepped out, not to the center, but to the margin of the wooden floor, where the light spilled and a shadow lived beside it. The quartet looked uncertain. The MC, delighted, shouted for pledges. 5,000 if she spins, a man called, trying to be fun. 10 if she doesn't fall, someone else added, less kind. The laughter rose in thin lines, the kind that cut. Lila closed her eyes and found the laundry room bulb in her memory. She breathed until the room sound muffled. When she opened them, she wasn't in their ballroom anymore. She was in her own. Ruth had started at the Keating house 12 years earlier when Lila was 6 and wanted to know why the floors were so clean they could hold the moon. Because someone made them that way, Ruth had said, and Lila had watched her mother become that someone, gracious hands scrubbing, inventory lists pinned to a corkboard like prayers. The Keatings threw galas and benefits and themed birthday parties for dogs. They were not cruel in the newspaper sense. Their cruelty was shined into politeness, a pause before pronouncing Ruth's name, a raised eyebrow at Lila's appetite. When plates came back with a little extra, a joke about the good silver when Ruth set the table. The children learned from the air how to rank people. Donors at the center, staff at the edges, the maid's daughter nowhere in the seating plan. Lila learned to be helpful and to disappear. She learned to wear solid colors and quiet shoes and to hold her belly when she laughed as if shrinking could make her safer. She also learned to dance the way you learn to breathe, by doing it when no one was watching. The first time Ruth found Lila dancing in the laundry room, Lila froze mid-turn, hands full of air. Ruth had put down the basket and clapped once, a sound so sharp and proud that Lila's cheeks hurt from smiling. "Where did you learn that?" Ruth asked. "From my knees," Lila said, because she had been learning since they wobbled. "From videos," she added, truth returning. Ruth saved tip money and bought a second-hand phone with a screen big enough to see choreography without squinting. Lila downloaded clips after midnight when the data was cheap. She copied not just steps, but intention, the way a dancer says, "This space is mine," with a shoulder, a wrist, a breath. She mixed ballet turns with Afrobeat hips and the stubborn joy of gospel praise breaks. She was big and she was fast and she was precise. She was a poem the world tried to edit with laughter. At school, a PE teacher told her to try something gentle for her size. Lila joined step team instead and learned to stamp rhythm out of floors that didn't expect it. She became the drum and the chorus. When a talent show called for auditions, she watched thinner girls born aloft by assumptions and decided not to audition. Ruth didn't push. She waited. She understood weight, how some women wore it and how all women bore it. The Keatings had a son, Ben, who once asked Ruth if she ever got tired of picking up other people's perfect. She had answered with a smile that wasn't a smile and kept moving. The Keatings also had a niece, Willow, who learned early to turn a room by changing her tone. She wanted to dance like the girls on her feed, but didn't want to sweat or be corrected. She took Lila into the guest house once to hang out and recorded Lila doing a TikTok challenge, then cropped her out before posting, leaving only Willow's half-committed moves for praise. Lila had watched the likes spin and felt the double hurt, her joy used and erased. It made her practice harder, not to be seen by them, but to be undeniable in herself. Mason, whose father owned half a block of ribbon-cutting businesses, lived for parties where music and power held hands. He liked picking targets because picking on equals was expensive. He wore a cruelty that looked like charisma if you didn't look long. He'd told Willow the night would be boring unless they made it memorable. The Keatings gala was his stage. Someone else's fear would be his joke. He saw Lila and thought, safe cruelty. Ruth kept her calendar full so she didn't have to keep her mouth full of broken words. She counted plates. She counted how many steps it took to get from pantry to dining room and back. She counted the times she'd been told, "Ruth, please," in a tone that wasn't a request. She never counted the times she swallowed a comeback. They were more than the dessert forks. When she saw Mason bow to Lila, she put down a stack of napkins and moved, slow but certain, toward her child. Lila felt her mother arriving like a second spine. The MC crowed. "A volunteer!" The quartet waited. Mason's eyes glittered with anticipation. Willow's smile flattened with excitement sharpened into meanness. Ruth murmured, "We don't owe them." Lila murmured back, "I owe me." The words weren't rebellious. They were measured. Ruth nodded, a blessing disguised as a breath. Lila walked to the lip of the dance floor where the world goes quiet before a step. The MC asked what song she preferred. Lila glanced at the quartet. "Give me your waltz," she said. "And then please, stop." Confusion fizzed. The quartet began a gentle 3/4. Lila inhaled and let the first turn carry her into the light like a ship that already knows the coastline. She did 3 clean pirouettes, landing on a beat that made a woman at the front table gasp softly. Then she lifted her hand, palm down. The quartet fell silent. A committee of whispers shuffled in the room. Lila looked at the sound engineer near the stage, a young black man who had set levels all night and gone unseen. "Track 3 on the USB," she said, smile small and conspiratorial. He blinked, then grinned. "Gotcha." He slid the fader. A low drum rolled out of the speakers like weather gathering. A choir sample lifted behind it, humming, then a held note like a sunrise. Lila stepped into it as if she were stepping into water she'd known in another life. At first, the room laughed, because laughter is what people do when their script is threatened. Lila's first move was not the one they expected. She didn't wiggle for a punchline. She pulled the music through her body like a wire pulls current. Head, shoulder, elbow, wrist, each joint a sentence, each sentence a refusal. The drum snapped. Her heel answered. The choir rose. Her chest opened. She sank low and unfurled up like a prayer standing. The DJ, bless him, rode the volume like a wave breaker, keeping her exactly where she needed to be heard. "Oh," someone said near the dais, not mocking, just startled. The Keating matriarch, Genevieve, lifted her chin to see better, champagne stalled mid-air. Mason's smirk hiccuped. Willow folded her arms tighter as if her bones could guard her from someone else's excellence. In the corner, a donor whispered, "She's good," and his wife replied, "She's better than the program." Ruth stood at the edge like a lighthouse, not moving, eyes bright as rain on a streetlight. Lila's body knew the room now, its acoustics, its corners, its watchers. She turned the glossy floor into a drum, stamping step-team patterns until a few older guests started clapping without permission from the MC. She spun and dropped and held a balance longer than the air deserved, her braid making a circle that crowned the crown she already wore. She was not small. She was not trying to be. She took space like a right. Willow's circle hissed. "She practiced this," Willow whispered, as if practice were a crime. "She planned it," said another, meaning it as an accusation, revealing more about their laziness than Lila's ambition. Mason muttered, "Cute," but the word came out bent. Genevieve turned to Ruth with a smile that attempted ownership. "Ruth, dear, we didn't know Lila danced," she said. Her tone filed the edges off the truth. Ruth didn't turn her head. She said, "Lila dances," as if announcing sunrise. The quartet's first violinist, caught by Lila's gravity, lifted her instrument and laid a counter-melody over the beat without being asked. Lila nodded thank you mid-turn, the musician's language. 2 servers leaned in the doorway, mouths open. The sound engineer looked like church found him in a tux. The song snapped to a break. Lila froze in a shape that should have fallen, didn't, then dropped into a floor sweep that made 3 girls at table 7 squeal. Willow took a step forward as if to reclaim the space she'd tried to give away as a joke. "I can do that," she said to Mason too loud. She lifted her phone and started to slink into the light, catching Lila in frame like prey. The sound engineer, catching the energy of a bad choice, cut the track to an a cappella clap. The room's heartbeat became human. Lila smiled at Willow without malice and clapped the rhythm once, inviting. It was a clean gift. Join if you mean it. Willow faltered. Her foot found the wrong beat. Her body found the old habit of shrinking into poses that asked for validation instead of making their own. A few guests tittered. Lila saved her, sliding the beat closer to where Willow stood with 2 simple steps that would welcome any body, if that body wanted to be welcomed. Willow blinked. at the generosity, at the proof, and backed away, stung by the absence of a punchline. People who live on jokes rarely know what to do when the joke dissolves. Mason recovered first, not with grace, but with volume. "Encore!" he shouted, as if he had created the moment and could extend it at will. The MC, grateful for a clear cue, bellowed, "Yes! Keep it going for our brave young—" He paused at the dangerous edge of a word like lady or girl, because labels announce who gets to be adult. Ruth's eyes cut to him like a bell. He swallowed. For Lila. It came out awkward and true. Not the maid's daughter, not our help's child, just Lila. Something in the room's temperature changed then. Not everyone felt it, but the ones who mattered did. The violin threaded back in with a motif that tasted like respect. Lila's last phrase was small and exact. A half-turn, a breath, a hand pressed to her sternum like a promise. The track ended with the faint hiss of a record that isn't a record, a produced nostalgia. Silence stood up. And then the clapping came, not the polite kind that attends every fundraiser, but the unruly kind that belongs to something honest. It didn't swell fast. It built the way a good fire does, measured, then inevitable. Ruth's hands were first. The DJ's hands were second. The quartet's bows hit strings in applause of wood against wire. A couple in the back, who had learned swing in their 30s and kept it soft in their 60s, stood. The Keating matriarch clapped with hesitation, like acknowledging talent might cost her a spoon. The teens clapped because not clapping would expose them. Mason clapped because he had been outmaneuvered and wanted to camouflage it. Willow clapped, eyes shining with a feeling she did not want to name. The MC shouted numbers, pledges that crashed against each other. 5,000! 10! 20! People love to spend when the story tells them they are good. Ruth did not look at the numbers. She looked at Lila's face, which did not ask for approval. It asked for water. Ruth moved, appearing at Lila's side in the sudden crowd, holding a glass like a lifeline. "Sip," she said. Lila sipped, hands steady now that they were done speaking for her. "You didn't owe them," Ruth whispered. "I owed me," Lila whispered back, and Ruth blinked hard because it sounded like a sentence she had taught her daughter without realizing it. If the story had ended here, it would have been tidy. But tidy is what invitations promise. Truth likes mess. As the applause softened, Genevieve glided forward, smile tuned for photographs. "Lila," she cooed. "What a delightful surprise. We must get you lessons." The word must wear a collar. Ruth's spine set. "Lila already has discipline," she said, level. Lessons aren't always the missing piece. Genevieve's eyes cooled a half-degree. "Of course," she said. "Still, a little polish." She gestured vaguely, as if talent were silverware. Mason cut in, eager to regain spotlight. "So brave," he said, "to get out there like that." He made brave sound like something you give a dog for sitting. "Tell us," he added, voice just this side of cruel, "was that your first time? Doing all that?" He wiggled his fingers like jazz hands for children. Before Lila could answer, a donor with a pocket square and opinions called, "Let's make it official. A little friendly dance-off for the fund." "Lila and Willow, you said you danced, darling?" Willow froze. Mason beamed at the chaos he could reignite. The MC looked to the board table for permission like a trained dog. Genevieve's smile sharpened. "That could be fun," she said, misreading the air because she had only learned to read weather she could command. Ruth spoke, not with volume but with finality. "We don't make my child prove her humanity for your pledges." The sentence landed like a gavel. Conversations near the stage went quiet, the way they do when someone says what everyone hoped wouldn't need saying. Willow's face flushed in public color, a punishing red. "I didn't—" she started but stopped. Lila had no desire to dance against anyone. Dance was not a contest for her. It was a language that rescued her from rooms like this. Still, she stepped half forward and half back, caught between a lifetime of being asked to perform for forgiveness and a new map she had drawn with her own feet. She glanced at Ruth. Ruth's head shook, a small earthquake. "You already danced," she murmured. "That's the whole sentence." Genevieve tried again, this time with checkbook charm. "Ruth, dear," she said, "this is for the arts." "Think of the program." Exposure can be... The word exposure made Lila's stomach clench. It is a word rich people use when they want the poor to work for free. The DJ coughed, an accidental laugh turning into a cough, and quickly adjusted a non-existent knob. Mason, feeling the moment slipping, decided to push it off the cliff. "Come on," he said, sweeping an arm wide. "One song for fun. For charity." He looked at the crowd. For the cause. People nodded because cause is a magic word that can excuse almost anything. Lila's hands opened and closed by her sides, her body remembering stages of fear like a flip book. Shrink, smile, apologize, agree. She felt each page and then, with intention, closed the book. "No," she said without heat. The sound was small and entire. It should have ended there. But a boy in a blue blazer, one of Mason's satellites, couldn't leave silence alone. He called out, "Scared she can't do it twice?" Another voice, older, sharper, said, "Scared she'll show you again." And the room split into currents, some pulling toward decency, some toward entertainment. The quartet held their instruments like shields. Ruth stepped between Lila and the pressure. "We're leaving," she said. Genevieve reached a hand, clamping a smile to a panic. "Ruth, don't be silly." "Silly," Ruth repeated softly, tasting the word that had been used to shrink her for years. She laid the water glass on a passing tray, turned to Lila, and nodded toward the door. Lila took a breath that felt like a first. And then, because bias hates losing control, security arrived. Not station cops. Private event guards with shoulders like rented furniture. One of them knew, scanned the room, saw a black woman and a black girl moving toward the exit, and stepped into their path. His hand hovered, uncertain, near Lila's elbow. "Ma'am," he said to Ruth, "staff are not allowed to mingle with guests." His script was policy. His eyes were assumption. Conversations snapped like branches in a frost. Ruth lifted her chin. "My shift is over," she said. "My daughter is leaving with me." The guard looked to Genevieve for instruction. Genevieve looked caught. Now the optics included a uniform and a boundary. Mason smirked. Chaos was content. Willow stared at her shoes, shame creeping up her calves. Lila felt the old heat, the one her body had turned into movement earlier, rise again, this time with nowhere graceful to go. The DJ, heart jackhammering, made a choice his paycheck hadn't authorized. He pressed the talkback and his voice came over the speakers, soft but amplified. "Security, please step back. The artist is done." The word artist rearranged molecules. The quartet's first violinist, eyes lit with a fury taught in conservatories and back rooms, added, "And we support her exit." Guests who had clapped now murmured in the guard's direction. Not a mob, but a pressure change. The guard's training, thin as paper, wrinkled. He stepped aside. Genevieve, trying to seize control, said loudly, of course, Ruth, Lila, we're all so proud." The phrase "we're all" felt like theft. Ruth did not accept it. "You will not use my child to fix your discomfort," she said, simple. Mason laughed, the wrong sound in the wrong moment. "It's a party," he said, flippant. "Don't be dramatic." A voice Lila hadn't expected joined then. From the far side of the room, Ben Keating, who'd been at college and home for the fundraiser, stepped forward, expression carved clean. "Mason," he said, "you were cruel. You don't get to call their reaction drama." He looked at his aunt. "Aunt Jen, this is on us." He turned to the crowd. "If your pledge depended on a girl performing for your approval, keep your money." Breath left the room in a single astonished sigh. A donor at the back put down his pen. Someone near the bar whispered, "Thank God," like permission had been granted to be decent. The MC tried to pivot. "Well, let's turn to the raffle." But the moment had changed color. Ruth and Lila walked out under chandeliers that suddenly looked like teeth. Outside, night remembered how to hold people without judging them. The air was cool and honest. Ruth's car smelled like lemon cleaner and peppermint candy she kept for emergencies. This qualified. They sat, doors shut, quiet, heavy, and kind. "I'm proud," Ruth said. Lila stared at her hands, at the faint tremble that arrived now that no one watched. "I was scared," she said, truth choosing her throat. "Being scared and doing it anyway is still doing it," Ruth replied. Lila laughed, small and tired. I didn't do it for them, she said. I know, Ruth said. You did it to hear yourself without their noise. They drove home through neighborhoods. That changed street by street, brick to glass to brick again, city, like a patchwork quilt that someone had stitched without a pattern. The song on the radio tried to be comforting and failed. They turned it off and let the tires hum. At the apartment, the laundry room bulb glowed. Lila stood beneath it for a second, head tilted. You want to? Ruth asked. Lila shook her head and hugged her mother instead, a long, anchored hug that said everything Dance had already said and more. In the days after, consequences landed like mail. Some arrived with stamps. Some were hand-delivered by people who realized, too late, that they had been watching the wrong thing. Genevieve called Ruth at 9 a.m. with a voice full of performance. About last night, she began. Ruth listened in the silence that had raised her daughter. Genevieve apologized without the words sorry or wrong, a feat of linguistics money often attempts. Ruth said, We will be billing the full rate for the extra hour, and hung up. Ben sent an email to the board. We can't raise money for the arts and then demand free art from the people we marginalize. Also, retrain security. 3 members replied with sincerity, 2 with silence that roared. The sound engineer edited Lila's dance from the security feed into a clean clip and texted it to Ruth with, For Lila if she wants it. Ruth asked Lila. Lila watched once and said, Save it. Don't post. The DJ laughed in relief. Didn't plan to, he said. It's hers. A week later, a woman who ran a community arts center on the South Side called. My violinist was at the gala, she said. She said there's a girl who moves like she owns her sky. We have scholarships. No auditions that perform trauma. Come as you are. Lila went. The studio smelled like rosin and resolve. There were mirrors, yes, but also a teacher who said on the first day, Your body is the instrument. We don't insult instruments here. Lila learned terms for what her body already knew. Plie, suspension, isolation, release. She learned to stretch without apology and to leap without asking the air for permission. She learned to say no to competitions and yes to showcases that felt like church. Meanwhile, the Keatings announced a values review of their gala practices. They hired a diversity consultant who charged a lot to say things Ruth could have said for free if anyone had asked her. Security got a memo. Do not police staff or guests based on assumed roles. The memo did not trumpet Lila's name. Ruth preferred it that way. The lesson should live in policy, not in a girl's body forever doing the teaching. Mason posted a Notes app apology that tried to be clever and failed. Comments roasted him lightly, then moved on because the internet is a river that rarely stops to drink. Willow DM'd Lila, I'm sorry I was ugly. You were beautiful. Lila stared at the message for a long time. She typed, deleted, typed again. She sent, I hope you find something you love enough to sweat for. Willow, who had never sweat for anything but drama, cried in a bathroom and didn't know why. Ben started volunteering on Saturdays at the community center, hauling marley floors and learning to say names right. He asked Ruth if he could pay for a van to drive kids from neighborhoods with fewer buses. Ruth said yes without giving him a medal. Later, she gave him a list of driver safety protocols and insurance details. His eyes widened and then he smiled, properly chastened by logistics. Lila performed at the center's spring show. There was no velvet rope, only folding chairs and a sound system that wheezed like an old man and still told the truth. She danced a piece called Laundry Room Light, choreographed by her and her teacher, feet beating out years of swallowed noise into rhythm. She bowed to a room that had sweat in it, and the applause felt like water after thirst, not sugar after hunger. Ruth sat in the front row and wept the precise amount, enough to show the river, not enough to flood the stage. Afterward, in the hallway with peeling paint and posters for free health clinics, a little girl asked Lila, How did you do that? Lila knelt so their eyes matched. I practiced when it didn't count, she said. So when they tried to make it a joke, it was already my language. The Keatings did not attend. Genevieve sent flowers because flowers translate guilt into fragrance. Ruth put them on the back porch for the bees. If you were Lila at the edge of that floor, would you dance or walk away And who would you be doing it for? If you were Ruth beside the chandelier crowd, what one sentence would you say to turn a spectacle back into a person? If you fund the arts, what policy would you write so no one's dignity is the price of your entertainment? If this story moved you, share it with someone who still thinks cruelty can hide under just a joke. Then pick one room you control, classroom, rehearsal hall, living room, and make a rule. Talent is welcomed. Bodies are respected, and no one is asked to prove their humanity for applause.